Welcome back to the Belonging Place, where we focus on communication, communities, belonging, purpose, all kinds of things. And I'm really excited to have my friend Zach here. Zach, welcome.
Thank you. I am happy to be here.
I think some people know you as Zach, but most people know you as what?
The outdoor therapist.
The outdoor therapist.
Probably.
Yeah, probably, right? Well, I guess there's a lot of people in your life that know you as that. But I don't really know you. We're like, I usually ask the other person about our meet cute, but we have met in the social world. But I very quickly gravitated to, and we're gonna talk a lot about this in this podcast, but to like sort of who you are, your way of being, the way that you interact with nature and the world, and just sort of your calming demeanor and like the way that you I feel like the unpaid therapy that you give on social media. And by that, I mean like, I think most people think they come to therapy to solve problems. And I think most people come to therapy to feel normalized. And you do a lot of normalization in your like posts of just helping people to know that like where they are is enough and where they belong, which is why I'm excited to have you today. So the first question I always ask people is, tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, that's always a big question.
Yeah.
No, thanks for that introduction. I honestly, my therapy page, we'll talk more about it, but it all came from my desire to feel loved, and I guess moments in my life where I felt like I didn't have someone, or I didn't have a friend, or the encouragement or the, kindness, validation that I was seeking. And so I started taking things from my journal and just thoughts that I've had and sharing them with the world,
Yeah.
in hopes that people would find some comfort in knowing that they're not alone in things.
And connect to it, right? Like
to it.
relate.
But as far as me, I was born and raised in Moab, Utah. My parents are river rafting guides.
Okay.
They own a rafting company, so they met as guides, and then kind of the rest is history there. So I've spent my life on the river.
Okay.
I've spent the majority of my life just growing up, meeting people from all over the world and hearing their stories and connecting with them, and hearing the hard things they go through. And it's funny when you're out on the river for 4 or 5 days at a time with people, they kind of have to let their guard down.
Yeah, break it down.
You're forced to break it down because you're out of your comfort zone. And so I get to see like the real bare bones, like real people inside them. Yeah. And it also just naturally just allows you to be yourself, and nobody's judging, nobody's competing. You're not trying to be anything special. You're just there to have a good time.
Yeah.
And so seeing that, I saw how much nature heals, and you understand, the healing power of nature and the outdoors. So just started to do more trips that are therapeutic in nature, rafting with people, with couples, with individuals, doing men's retreats, fathers and sons trips to help heal some of those wounds, and women's retreats with moms and daughters and healing some of those wounds as well. And it's just so powerful, so cool.
Yeah. Going back to you, before you became a therapist, like what would you tell us about you? Tell us about Zach.
Oof. I think that I held on to this word and this idea for so long about myself, and this brings up some emotion in me because it's it's still kind of a hard thing. But for a long time, I think the word that best described me was misunderstood, because I'm a people pleaser by, my whole life, basically wanting people to see the value in me and not really knowing why I felt like I wasn't lovable. And so I would give and give and give, and then still feel like I didn't have friendships and connection and depth in things, or that people would still judge me and still not like things about me. And I just didn't really know why. And so I just felt like I was very misunderstood for a long time. And then I realized that the misunderstanding that I was feeling was coming from trying to prove myself to the wrong people, trying to prove myself to the people that no matter what I do would never actually appreciate it. And that the more I give, the less they appreciate it. And so I slowly realized over time that you'll never feel like you're enough for the wrong people, but you'll always be enough for the right ones.
Yeah.
And in finding those right people, I let my guard down and realized I don't have to prove anything.
Yeah. I want to step one step more out. Even with the right people, I think it's hard for people to get to the place where, and tell me what you think about this, just like where your worth is inherent.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm worthy, and I am worthy to be loved and to create space and to be here regardless, for sure, for not for the people who don't relate, but even for the people that do, because if we put our energy into them, they fail us. Even the people who love us, right? Like over time, right? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I loved how you said, like, when you put your energy into the wrong people, they will still fail us no matter what. And that's such a hard life lesson to learn, but one that I've realized, and that I think, answering your question, there's no single thing or act or success or accomplishment or anything that you can do that decides your worth. It's not like a checkpoint of like, okay, now I'm worthy, or, you know, you get to the end of your life and you're like, oh, check off all these boxes. Yep. I'm a good human that did good things, and so I'm finally worthy.
Some people wish there was,
some
right?
People, some people wish there were, exactly.
Or like spend their lives trying.
Exactly. But I mean, when we get to the end of our lives, we're going to look back, and the only thing that really matters, like, nobody cares what you look like or what car you drive or, you know, the clothes you wear, what job you have. Nobody will ever care about that. They'll remember, and they'll care about how you made them feel. And I know you've heard probably that similar quote. And I paraphrase it obviously, but that's the thing, is like, your worth is very much inherent. Like, the fact that you exist is your worth. I saw this example one time, and it was like a $5 bill that was like brand new, and a $5 bill that was crumpled up and had been through a lot. And it's like, yeah, this one looks nice. Like, it has the nice things. It's crisp. It's fresh. It's still worth $5. This one's been through hell and back and is crumpled up. It has been in the washer, has been, you know, on the ground, was found in a gutter one time, was abandoned. Like, and it's still worth $5.
Yeah, and give me that person any day over this person,
any
right?
day.
Like, I can relate.
Yeah,
and people can relate to that, right?
And that's, I think, the thing that we don't take into account enough, is that the greatest people in our lives are the people that have been through the hardest things. And I just think
I relate to the depths of that. I know
the depths of that. I think of myself, and I'm like, you know, I've been through some hard things, and I don't share a lot with a lot of people, just because it's one of those things. It's like, if I give it to you, you're not going to really use it for good, or you're not going to accept it, because
you have space for it? Can you hold it? Can you not make it about you, right?
Yeah. Like, so sharing it with the right people, but man, once you do have those right people, it just,
vulnerability invites connection at no other level that I know, right? Like, given in the right place and the right safety. Zach, if I were to go back and we were around and I said to you at the very beginning of this podcast, hey, Zach, tell us about you, but you can't say anything you've done or that you have.
Like, explaining who I am.
Yeah.
To the core. Maybe give me an example of like the verbiage. So I'm just saying,
you can't say like, I am a river raft guide, or I'm a therapist, or I'm from a family of, like, if you were to sit and tell somebody without the things that you've accomplished or without the things that you've done, what would you say?
Maybe like qualities, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say that I am a kind, curious, understanding, and empathetic human.
Yeah. Talk to me about that process that you just went through.
How I got to those words.
Just like, what does it feel like to have to sit and think about yourself without the accomplishments or things or the accolades?
Feels like a therapy session. No, it's I think something that we don't do often enough. I think a question I like to ask other people that I'm going to turn back to myself is, what are you most proud of? Yeah. Or what quality in yourself have you worked the hardest to develop, and why? Yeah. And those are, those are pretty powerful things, because we're really good at criticizing ourselves. We're really good at looking at the flaws of things and being hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're not very good at finding all the things we're good at. We're not very good at being kind to ourselves, even though we're so kind to other people in the pursuit of getting that validation. I would say
even more than we're not very good at being kind to ourselves. We live in a world that seems to say that our value or our worth is in being a producer. meaning I'm doing things. I'm a mother, I'm a father, I work, I'm a therapist, I'm a this, I'm a this. We collect things in our lives that make us, when we introduce ourselves to people, when like, what's the first thing you ask? What do you do? You don't usually ask people like, who are you? Or like,
Yeah.
who have you become? Or like, this isn't the thing when we are meeting and connecting with people, right? We seem to have a value in our society for stuff, and we often forget like who we are or whose we are in the process of that. It's one of the things I've loved asking people on the podcast, because everyone kind of has to stop and be like, I don't, what am I? The same thing. Like, are you asking me qualities? Are you asking me whatever? There's something inherently inside of us that has a very easy response to like what I do and what I have, but not necessarily to like who I am and or who I'm becoming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I saw a quote recently that said something along the lines of, if you claim to be like self-aware and have self-awareness, but you're only recognizing the things you have to change and not all of the things that you're good at, then you're actually just being mean to yourself.
I love that.
and I was like, whoa. I'm like, okay, so that is true. Like, I definitely find myself like constantly focusing on what can I do better? Like, what can I do differently? And luckily it's from a place now. I think before it was from a place of like wanting to be good enough for people.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's
That's
just, I
critical.
genuinely just like, I like to be better and just to grow. I think there's self-love is a huge topic in the world of therapy. You understand that. And like, especially like on social media, everybody's like, oh, love yourself and self-care and like do all these things. And I think that the greatest form of self-care and self-love is having the ability to recognize what things you can and need to change and work on, and loving yourself enough to do the work to do it, and believing that you're worth doing that work.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm pulling out the big guns because I think you're capable of holding it, but because of what you do as outdoor therapist. So there was a string of times that I was watching outdoor therapists, and it was just filled with like goodness about people. Love yourself. And the thought came to my brain, I wonder how Zach's doing. How is the outdoor therapist doing? Because it's one thing to like tell people how they should and that they're loved. Easy, I think.
Yeah.
Different, like, and then it was like the next post was this pretty vulnerable post about you being like, I'm not doing well, like things are hard. And I was like, yes, because in a world where people are finding you and connecting to you because you are telling them what they need to hear, and I'm not saying it's not good stuff, but you know that it's stuff they need to hear, right? They also need to connect to like the reality that like you're not just this talking head that says nice things, right? They need to know that there are bad days and it's hard to build a van from scratch, and that it's, there's something to be said about the vulnerability. And so this is my next question. Talk to me about that process or that balance, or why you feel the need to sort of show both sides, or is it important for you to show that you're doing bad or having a hard time as well as the good, and the Zach behind that? Like, what's going on in that process for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I put a lot of thought into this. Social media is such a weird world. Like we were just talking about some of our friends that, people only see one little part and they only know one little piece of the details of things. And so it's a very vulnerable thing at times. So I'm hesitant to share some things that I'm going through, because there will always be people that will take whatever you're struggling with or whatever you're going through and weaponize it or use it to fit the story that they want or need. And that goes to every sort of situation. Like everyone will create a story about you based on what serves them the best. And that's simply how it works, except for those people that truly get to know you and care about you. And so going back to your original question of why it's important to share some of the vulnerable sides and also the positive sides. Someone asked me once, like, how are you always so happy? And I said, I am not always happy. I promise. I am sad a lot. I'm frustrated. But I try to always be grateful.
Yeah.
And that's what I found is a huge thing. And in showing vulnerability, it's showing that we're all human. Like here we are. It's easy for people to look at your Instagram and be like, oh, you've got, 180,000 followers. Like you're something special. Like I'm no different than anyone. Like the only difference is that I'm like sharing.
I might beg to differ.
Okay,
You're Zach.
I'm Zach. We're all different, but you know what I mean? We're all humans. We're all experiencing
People
this human
are
experience.
relating and connecting at a level of what you're saying, I think, because of your vulnerability. I would say not in spite of it, right? Like you're choosing to take moments literally out of your life or out of your journal, literally, and say, I'm going to share this almost like poetry, right? I'm going to give you the thoughts that I'm giving myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to coach outward what I'm coaching inward, right? And people can relate to that. At a certain degree, people can't relate to that anymore because you start to sound like this guru that's like got it all figured out, right?
I think that's why I like veer away from like direct advice a lot of the time, and I'm more sharing like quotes or like thoughts or like things from my journal, because there are a billion experts in this world, and like I'm a therapist. Like I've done schooling for this, so I guess some people could be like, you are an expert, you're a professional, and I'm not trying to discount that, but I think that puts us in a different like a pedestal.
Powers,
and I don't like that. Like, I like to be as like a peer. Like I like people to think that if we were to meet, we could sit across the table and have a conversation, and you would feel the same warmth in that as you do from my posts.
And this is my favorite thing. And I said this to you before we were like in the podcast. I wrote a book years ago, and when I was working with my publishers and everything, and they're like, who's your audience and what does it look like? I had this visual. And when I help people write their books, I ask them to do this too. And it's hard for some people, but I was like, if you see your person, your client, or whatever, like, what do they look like? And my person looked like they were sitting on the couch in their comfy clothes, hair up in a bun, glasses on, reading the book. I'm talking to them on the couch also in my like loungewear, makeup off. It's a book about being single, but we're having like a conversation. I'm not preaching, I'm not coaching, but I'm talking about ideas, and they're like hearing the ideas and they're asking me questions. And I mean, the best review I ever got was somebody who said that, man, I don't know her, but it was so relatable that I felt like I was sitting on the couch next to her, and I was like, bingo. When I listen to you on social media, I feel like it's just like your day in the life of Zach, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, by the way, blah, 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 blah. It feels very relatable. It feels like you're living your life and you're doing your thing. You have your ups and your downs. And by the way, you should love yourself. Bam. And by the way, everybody is having a hard time, so we're in it together. Bam. Or whatever you're saying.
Yeah.
And is that intentional? Is that just who you are?
I mean, obviously it's a little bit intentional of like, I know that's what I've needed. I know that's what my friends have needed. So I know that's probably what everyone else needs. Like one of my favorite comments and messages that I get often is, this post feels like a warm hug.
Oh, I love that.
I know. I'm just like, oh. Or I got a message the other day that this is probably my favorite DM I've ever gotten, and it makes me a little bit emotional because I mean, you'll feel this when you hear it. But someone messaged me and said, I just wanted to say, if we had gone to kindergarten together, I would hang my coat up next to yours. Oh. And I was like, what? It just like,
how cute is that?
I know, right? It wrecked me because I was just like, that's the energy that I want to share. That's the energy that the world needs. Like in a world that is so full of hate, and it's like, it's common and normal for people to get road rage and like flip you off and all of these things. But it's weird to say hi to a stranger in the street, or it's weird to wave to someone that you don't know, or ask how they're doing, or talk to people
anymore. Man.
Like, why is kindness the weird thing? Why is being gentle and loving with people the thing that we're so recalcitrant towards doing? And that's just what I think I've tried to create. And that's why, I mean, that's part of why I like haven't really sold anything either. Like I've made $1 from Instagram last year. Like I don't make money. Because I'm just trying to like, and I'm not saying it's bad to make money, but it's hard because I just want
this alternative.
Yeah. Like I ultimately just want people to feel like they're worth loving, because there are so many people, myself included, have been in places where I don't feel like I'm worth loving. Or that I'm not. And
I want you to hear me say, that's what brought you to me and me to you, right? Like, and I'm writing back to you on a regular basis. I'm saying I love you. I'm saying very like close things to somebody I don't know, because I feel like I know you, right? Like the bonds. I also want to reflect back to you, Zach, like in a world of even when the Surgeon General comes out and says loneliness is a pandemic, and that it's like, smoking packs of cigarettes, right? Like that we're dying from the opposite of connection. I just want to highlight and I want to validate you for creating a belonging place, a space where people feel safe, a space where people aren't feeling preached at, a space where people kind of, if you want a pep talk, it can be a pep talk, right? Yeah. If you want a hug, it can be a hug. But there's a lot of ways to use your voice and a lot of ways to spend your time. And I just want to say thank you for using your voice and your heart and spending your time there. Anything else about that?
I appreciate it. I guess just kind of a message to anyone listening, obviously, of I think something that you will always get a return from in this life is being willing to kind of put yourself out there to show kindness to other people. And I think originally, I think a lot of us, it comes from a place of kind of people pleasing and craving and seeking validation. And honestly, I waited a long time before I even started posting on Instagram to get to a place where I knew I didn't need that.
Got it.
So that it could be authentic and real. And like my hope, honestly, in all of it is that I can inspire other people to be a little kinder to themselves and to other people. And could you imagine, I mean, in a world that everyone spent maybe 10 minutes a day actively trying to like reach out and be kind to someone, it would be an exponential change. Like if just everyone, right? You know, was kinder to 2 people a day, it just would be the wave of change that we need. If we were a little more empathetic, if we were a little more understanding and we tried to figure out what other people are going through before telling people what we're going through. Yeah. And I know that seems a little bit crazy, but you'll find that you will heal so much in trying to learn about and be there for someone else as they're healing. Yeah. And you have to choose the right people. You can't just exhaust yourself, but you'll find friends, you'll find connection, you'll find depth, you'll find purpose, you'll find meaning, you'll find all sorts of things as you focus on just trying to understand others.
I love that. Okay, we're going to shift to the wilderness, the outdoors.
All right.
This is another passion that we share. I'm going to talk a little bit about my connection to this, where therapy meets wilderness or outdoors, and then I want to kind of shift over and hear your thoughts and how you kind of came. So once upon a time, I was a wilderness therapist at a program down in Arizona called Anasazi, and I have never really talked a ton about it on this, so I want to talk just a little bit about it. So I kind of crawled in a window. I was desperate to get a job. I was almost going to have to move home. It was in 2010. Nobody was getting jobs. My friends that had graduated from like law school were delivering pizzas. I mean, it was bad. It was a bad. And so I got this part-time summer job at a wilderness program. I had about zero knowledge about what wilderness therapy was. Unlike everybody else that I seem to have fallen into, everyone kind of had somebody or knew somebody that connected them. So I feel like I'm a little bit of an anomaly. I fell in through the window and loved it so much and so hard that I sort of created a position until there was one. And then I became a full-time therapist and was there for 4 years and probably would still be there. But the reality of wilderness therapy and the pay and the thing is just not a longitude job. But like nothing against, and could have found growth edges for years there. I could talk a lot about why Anasazi was amazing, but I want to just share a few things that I know I cannot even get close to as a therapist. So my career as 16 plus year therapist, for those who are kind of new to the podcast and me, has been with adolescents. So in residential for the most part. So teens, right? And people always ask me, well, what do you specialize in? I specialize in teens, which means I'm doing substance, trauma, anxiety. I'm doing all the things, right? When I am in wilderness, when I'm a wilderness therapist, it means that I hike for Anasazi. I'm just going to describe this. It means we drive out into the Tonto National Forest. We leave at like 3 a.m. in the morning, and then we drive, and then at 5 a.m. we like show up, and then we hike in because we're not trying to have any of our worldliness in there, right? So we're hiking in. We deliver letters, so we're a little bit like Santa Claus, I feel like, every week, we're delivering letters from families, but we sit down and we do these sittings. We sit in the earth and we're having our therapy sessions. And if I want to talk about, if I want to give a kid a tool about anxiety, I don't talk to them about it. We go to the water and we stick our face in the river and we do tip, right? Tip is temperature change or it's intense. If I need them to be present and they need to exercise, we run in place. If I need to talk about depression and motivation, sitting in an office, it's hard when people are like, I have no motivation. When you're on the trail, you're walking, you're hiking your way mile after mile to your next water spot. Like you can't even drink the water till you go to the cow tank, and you have to walk miles to get to it. It's like your depression disappears as you walk yourself into happiness, I would say, right?
Yeah.
If you come into the trail as a kid and you hate your parents and everything is their fault, your addictions, your relationships, the choices that you've made are your parents, you can kick the tree and you're going to break your foot, but the tree's not going to kick you back, right? You can kick the stone and the stone is not going to kick you back. You can yell and scream at the top of your lungs and no one's yelling back at you, right? The stars are going to shine. The rain is going to come. You can build a fort and you can ask, we call it the making of an asking. You could ask somebody who's there, trained, how to make a good fort, or you can just try and do it yourself, and you can then be wet the next day. And the staff lovingly is just going to let you fail, because the making of an asking in life is important, right? Like, I am not going to tell you what to do, but if you get curious and you ask me, I'm happy. I will fall over myself to help you. These are just a few of the things out there that I like as a in an office therapist, and I tried even in my day-to-day practice when I was doing it to take kids up to the canyon and do this, because it's just not the same, right? Also the grounding, right? Like, take your shoes off, take your socks off, actually stand in the earth. So I have, if you call it a testimony or a passion for the outdoors, period. And then I have a passion for what it does for people in their healing process, and what it does for them in their coping, and what it does just physiologically. And so the 4 years that I was a wilderness therapist, I just was convinced, and I'm still convinced, there's no other better way to do therapy. There just isn't. No amount of talk therapy, no amount of processing therapy, no amount of medication. I just was like, this is it. This is how we come back to ourselves, right? And on Anasazi, we have this spiritual component that says, like, this is how you come to know your maker. Because when you've screamed at everybody else and you've blamed everybody else, and all that you're left with is yourself and your maker, then you can finally heal. Then you can finally change. And this is something that I just have such a passion for. And when people are talking to me and asking about where they should go and what they should do, I often have a conversation about, at some level, is there a way that you can get your kid back into nature? How can we unplug them? How can we pull them out of circumstances they have hijacked brains or hijacked hearts? And how do we get them back to this place? And so all that is to say, it seems like you also have this, I mean, you grew up on the river, right? I mean, if there is something that has more analogies or more stories or more healing, it's got to be the river, right? How it carves, how it does it. So without me sharing my thoughts about that, I want to turn some time over to you to talk about the river and what it does in its healing process, and how you decided to sort of use your love of this to connect your love of that. Yeah.
Great question. I agree with, so much of that. And my experience, I've worked with treatment centers and worked outside with youth and seen so much growth. And when you let them fail, when you let them try hard things and let their guard down and realize that, like, you can fall and get back up. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting. I mean, like, you look at little kids, like, how many times do they fall over as they're learning to walk? Do they stop because they're like, oh, I failed? No. Because they don't have any expectations. They don't have any, like, one saying, oh, you failed, you're the worst, or you're never going to do this.
No limitations.
Exactly. There's no limiting beliefs. And so I think something about nature and just being outside is we get away from so many of those limiting beliefs. We get away from so much of the pressure that is society, that is work, that is, relationships and other things. And we're just allowed to be ourselves. And I another quote that I love is, what if becoming the greatest version of you is actually more about unbecoming everything that isn't truly in alignment with who you are? Yeah. And that's something that I really leaned into, of, like, stripping back the layers. Like, you've put up this armor, so to speak, this defense to protect yourself from everyone else and from all the things that people are thinking about you. And most of the time, it's actually a story we're creating on our own. And, like, as we put it on, it's like, oh, this will help me, or this will make me feel better, or this will protect me from them,
this will numb me.
Exactly. Yeah. And in doing so, like, the more we we try to become what other people think we should be, the further we get from who we actually need to be in this
and
life.
the less we connect.
And the less
Isn't
we
this
connect
wild?
with others and with ourselves. So all that, going back to the river and growing up on the river, is I've just realized in my own peeling back the layers and in my own, coming back to myself, that we have core values and identity that is who we are. And as you lean into that and embrace that, and that doesn't mean, I think a lot of times people attach that to like anger and blame of other people. I think the greatest way to grow is not in blaming others and not in blaming yourself either, but in taking accountability for the role that you play in your own life, in your own suffering, in your own situations, and that's different, very different. I want to be clear, like very different than like the victim blame type of thing. Like you, it's not your fault that people have done things to you. Absolutely not. And also they can't change anything for you. No one else can.
It's empowering to look around. I think when we break up in relationships too, it's like, what can I take that was mine? What can I give you that was yours? And it was never mine. And what do we learn? This third thing, being in this relationship. And if we never take the things that were ours, how do you grow? How do you have a growth edge? You just stay the same person and you have the same problems, right? But if you take other people's problems, those were never yours to take, right? And they were never yours to fix. And so there's this kind of important balance, right? In like standing up in your life and being accountable and forgiving and working, but also letting go. Yeah. Like you said, just letting go what's not mine.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you were saying earlier, and I love this idea too of I'm a river guide. I've grown up guiding my whole life, and it is my job to take care of people, make sure they're safe. And it's also my job to, rescue them if anything's happening in this certain context, and like medical professions, all of those as well. But in life in general, like it is never your job to rescue someone. It's never your job to fix someone who is broken. It's simply your job to love them, because people aren't problems that need to be solved. They're not like broken things needing to be fixed. They're just people that need to be loved.
Yeah. And I think, and I've said this multiple times, inherently we have what we need. So the gift we give people when we listen and we're curious, but we don't tell them what to do or rescue them, is we blow that belief back in them. You have what you need. And if you don't have what you need, you can find it. Like, I am not going to give it to you. You can ask for it. Like, don't give unsolicited advice, right? Yeah. I've been on the water multiple times and been in rapids, and it's interesting, the lessons that it teaches you just in the being in it, right? Like, you don't control it. It controls you. If you do certain things, there's like this very vivid consequences. It seems like the perfect place to do therapy. I mean, this is a duh to me, but I don't know that it's a duh to everybody else. So can you talk to us a little bit about like...
Yeah. So one of my favorite things, obviously there's a lot of growth on a trip, but I run these like rafting retreats, and the one that I do the most is I call it rafting to realness.
Okay.
Because that's like essentially what it is. Like, you are literally rafting and using that to peel back those layers and open up to the real version of you again. And how does that work? Because you're facing your fears. Like I'm sure everyone listening has heard this, but like the greatest growth is on the other side of the thing that you fear the most. Yeah. The step into the dark, the move into the uncomfortable, and allowing yourself to really
giving someone else
push.
Control. This is the thing on the water, is you have to give your guide like,
and
okay.
trusting people when maybe trust is a really hard thing for you to do. And so how do you rebuild trust in someone and in yourself? Is like allowing yourself to trust someone and then getting a different result. That's one of the greatest ways to heal trauma as well, is like, if you have trauma from relationships, you can do so much healing on your own, and you should. And also, you're going to have to at some point heal in a relationship as well. And
it's the mirror of the healthy version.
Exactly.
Right?
Many people talk about this all the time, especially in the world of therapy, of like, you don't have to be perfectly healed to be in a relationship. You don't have to have all of your trauma and all of your baggage.
Can you?
How can
because
you?
Because a relationship is more than you.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
You just have to be willing to accept that, be aware of it, and be doing the work. And so on the river, it all kind of does the work for you in some ways, because I mean, say you're afraid of water. I had one.
That's wild to decide to go on a rafting trip if you're afraid of water.
But it's so funny. And I mean, last year I had a trip where there's like 20 people from all over the world and country. Like literally everyone came from a different place, and they were all healing from some sort of heartbreak. And Um, Another trip, I had other people who were just recently divorced or had been single their whole life and were just trying to like be okay with what they're going through. And one girl came with her friend, and this is an awesome thing. She was afraid of snakes. She was afraid of like rapids, afraid of like so many things. And she just said, I'm going to face my fears. And
Yeah.
so she came, and what did we do? We found a snake, and she was able to kind of face that fear. She was in the rapids, like all these things. And at the end of it, and I hope she's listening to this because I won't say her name so that she can, whether she wants to or not, but she literally got a tattoo, Fearless, on her wrist because of that. And she thanked me for this experience because it pushed her to change and do the work to change. And, we always talk about how connection and growth and change comes from like sharing experiences and doing things that scare us and all of this. But really the growth that comes from these shared experiences is from the emotion that we feel. And that's the biggest thing, is like we can live day to day with a partner and we're sharing experiences, or day to day with friends and we're sharing these experiences. But if those experiences don't allow us to feel a range of emotions, then the depth to which we can actually connect is pretty shallow. And so really on the river, it's like you have 4 days where you're scared, you're hot, you're cold, you're laughing, you're crying, you're
trusting,
you're vulnerable, you're trusting, like you are experiencing immense amounts of emotion in such a short period of time that just really shakes things up. And I will say there is a little bit of a high and then a low after you get back, where you're just like, what was that? And it's just like anything in life where you have highs and lows, of like you take the highs, you learn from them, and you use that to push you through the lows to then get back to a higher average, right? The homeostasis.
You get to decide if it's just a rafting trip or if it's the beginning of change, right? Lasting change. You get to decide if you're just along for the ride or you're participating in the ride, right? I mean, this is symbolic as well as physical, right? But you get to decide if this change changes me. You get to mark it in time, right? Or if that was just an event that happened, right? Like that was a really fun event. And I think in the words of therapy, we kind of have called this experiential therapy, right? Like it's living the therapy, right? You can break it down and have conversations about it, but mostly it's where you're doing therapeutic things without having to talk about it. You just know, you just like sit on the river and you learn without anybody having to talk, or you climb the mountain, or you do the thing, right? In the processing though, we do learn a lot about ourselves and others, right? And I've often thought about marriages and just relationships, and I do this not just because I'm a therapist, but because I'm a verbal processor. But I like to talk about what I'm experiencing with my friends and with people. I found that it's very connecting, right? And not just the good things that are happening, but like the struggles that I have. And I just don't think we do that enough. I think we're often not participating, or we're participating, we're just floating down the river, right? We're not getting done with the experience and then having a little like, let's talk about what we just did, right? We sort of are just like one experience after the next in our life, and we don't do enough of this sort of like, what am I going, where am I learning, how am I marking this, how am I talking about it? I think there's something to be said about this
is something that I get fired up about, because probably one of the most frequent questions I get from people is, where are my people? Like, how do I find my people? And by putting yourself out there, like plain and simple. And I know I'm not saying everyone needs to come on a rafting trip, but like there are people that come on these trips where it's like you are all going through the same types of things, and you become really good friends because you find your people. And I know, like I say, it's not feasible for everyone. I wish it were, and I'm trying to figure out, how to make that more accessible. But going out to a park to read a book in the sun and saying hi to someone else who might be sitting there alone, like, what are you reading? Is that scary? Absolutely. But could you potentially make a new friend that probably is going through a similar thing to you? In
the same place, right? We have these propinquities that we're in. Yeah.
And so you find your people by doing the things that you want to do for you, the things that set your soul on fire, the things that make you feel healed. There's a difference between, what do you call it? It's like when your nervous system is dysregulated, there's coping that just makes you get by, you're surviving.
And be present, right?
Yeah. And then there's actively healing.
Yeah.
And those are very different things. One is survival, one is intentional. One is to get through the moment, and the next is to make it so that you have less of those moments you have to get through. That's right. And in stepping out of your comfort zone and finding these other people, that is a huge part of healing. Like, people are meant to have connection. And I know that's hard to hear sometimes when you feel like you're so lonely and you have the crippling anxiety and some of this depression. And it's one of those things where I'm like, you can sit with that, or you can choose to maybe do something little, like a baby step of something.
Yeah,
like that's the baby step thing. That's the hard part. I'm like, I don't want to feel like I'm discounting everyone that's going through this, because I've been there. It's hard. There's been days where I've just not wanted to even get out of bed. And the best thing that ever happened was taking a little bit of a step to just stand up, and then to go outside and get some sunshine. And then slowly after that, I had maybe a little more energy to go to the store. And then going to the store, I saw that there's other people, and I was able to be like, oh, these other people are probably going through things too. I felt like I wasn't alone. And then from there, a little more energy. So it's little by little, like these little, small and simple steps to get started. It's not grandiose. It's not huge. The greatest change doesn't come from huge things. It's from little things over and over and over.
Speaking of
consistently.
water, corrosive over time, right?
Yeah,
We have the
erosion.
Grand Canyon. I mean, this is the thing about
so many analogies.
Some things consistent over time. I mean, you hit on the belonging place. This is the thing that I talk about. I call it wells, because in the scriptures, the well was the gathering place. It's where you got the water. It's where romantically you found, I love the well that you've created. I have a choir that I have because I love to sing and I love to testify of Christ. And I was like, if I create a choir that brings other people who want to sing and testify of Christ, what a belonging place, right? I have a good friend down in Arizona who's been listening to my podcast and been friends for years, who loves to sew. And he's done some projects, but recently he Marco Polo'd me and he talked to me about how he was like, I need to have more friends and belonging. He's a divorced single dad. And so he put on just like on the internet, he's like, I'm doing he like reserved a room in a library. And he was like, to anybody who wants to learn how to sew. And he's like, it's been crazy, the anxiety and the process of like, but multiple people signed up. And the first time, he learned what went well and didn't go well. So he's now doing his second. In the summer, he does these sewing classes for kids in the summer, these sewing camps. And I just love so much that like, he's creating something that he loves, and he's not necessarily, I wouldn't say he's like has an MBA, he hasn't started a business, he doesn't have an LLC, the things that people start to spin in their heads are like, I can't do this. It's just like, I have a skill and a talent and I'm going to share it, right? There's something to be said about times and seasons in your life. There are times when all you can do is ride the train. I say it. You can't build the well. You don't have the energy, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the desire, but you can certainly go to the well, right? And or you can ride the train, I call it. And there's other times when you can build the train. Once you build the train, everybody wants to ride it, but not everybody wants to build it, right? And the great thing about, I think, our lives is that we have different times and seasons where we're like, can I just ride the train for a while? I don't want to be a producer. I want to receive, right? And then there's other times when we have it or we feel called to it and we're producing and we're building. And I think everybody can be a part of any of that. But for those who are listening and are just like overwhelmed by being a well builder, it's like, it's okay. Like, if all you can do is walk to the well or get on the train or buy the ticket, like it's enough, right? Yeah. On either side of that.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I agree with all of that.
So I have a couple more questions for you. You recently built out a van.
I did, yes.
Okay. This is a thing that a lot of people have, like, about 5 or 6 years ago, I felt like everybody was doing this. Yeah. And I was following a whole bunch of Sprinter van things. I kind of just like, it's maybe dopamine. I don't know. There's like this process of watching something gutted out and like rebuilt that I just like, and I myself am not a builder, but I want to ask you this question. In that process, and you can take this at any level that you want, what did you learn?
What did I learn?
What have you learned in that process?
So many things. I think the biggest thing, honestly, so I worked with my buddy Travis to build it. I hired him to kind of oversee and design. He's a professional builder and he does amazing work. And I just told him, I was like, look, I want this to be a space where I can feel like it's a safe space for me too, like just a good space, almost like a cabin feel. So he's like, okay, so we'll do lots of good wood. And so I'm like, we're talking through the things, and I need Starlink, and I need all these, battery and stuff to be able to see my people online, remotely. And so we kind of created this vision and then just went to work at it. and didn't really like, we didn't draft anything out. We didn't sketch anything out. We didn't even have blueprints and stuff really, which I don't know if I would like recommend that's how you do it. I think having those things is really good. But the biggest lesson I learned as I was thinking about that question is it's all going to work out how it's supposed to. Like, it's all going to figure itself out slowly, and you're going to have bumps in the roads. I mean, literally, like on one of the last days, my friend ended up cutting his finger off, like the tip of his finger. That's kind of gruesome, I know. But like, we had to go to the hospital, and it didn't all quite get finished how we wanted it. But like, did it get done? Yes, we finished it. Were there bumps in the road? Absolutely. Did it turn out even better than I expected? Yes. And that's kind of the lesson of life is, as you continue to just keep moving forward, and sometimes forward doesn't always mean forward. I guess movement. Right? I say moving in a direction.
Trajectory,
sometimes is going back. The whole analogy of the mountain, right? You have peaks and valleys. Like, there's moments of highs and lows, but as you keep moving forward, you eventually get to where you need to be. And I think in life, direction and intention is so much more than speed and even what like steps you're taking. Yeah. It's like, if you have the direction of like, I want to create value in life, like for me, for when I was creating my account and like what I'm doing in life, like I have to have the value and the why behind what I'm doing first and foremost. And on the days when I feel like I don't know what I'm doing or my wheels are spinning, I know that because I have my intention and my direction is clear, and it's to help people and to heal myself, I'm gonna grow. And I'm going to get there. And whatever's meant to happen for me is going to happen. Yeah. And this last year, I've seen that more than ever, as I have put myself out there and really dedicated to creating content and reaching out to people and opening and doors that are meant for me and closing the doors that are not meant for me, and not dwelling on things, just letting go of what's holding me back. Exactly.
Is yours, and what's not is not. And
yeah, so many opportunities happen when you're able to let go of the things that you've been trying to just keep going, and allow these doors to open. It's like
the monkey. Have you heard the monkey in the jar that's holding onto the, and
his fist is like stuck in it.
What if I zoomed out from what you just said, some of the things that I find that are just so interesting is, because I like to break down things sometimes for people, because it seems almost magical or mythical that like you gut it out, and and there are some things, or like, oh, you guide people down the trail and you're a therapist. Like, if we were to pull the curtain, the Wizard of Oz curtain, there's like line upon line, foot in front of foot work. Like, you got a degree, you got a master's degree on the therapeutic side. Not that you have to, but for your anchor of evidence-based good work, you're not doing harm, right? You have all this redirecting experience. You didn't just get on the trail, right? You hired a friend who knew what he was doing. Even if you didn't have blueprints, it's not like you were like, oh, let me just figure it out. Though I think people can, I'm not saying, but there's something to be said about this process that sometimes when people get overwhelmed in the desire to like do good even, right? I often say to people, sometimes it's literally a matter of just putting one foot in front of the other. And sometimes there's some drudgery or some just like red tape that you have to do, right? I don't know that many people who loved their graduate program that are therapists. They sort of just did it so they could have a license, so they could do the thing that they love, right? Now, there are some people, I'm sure, but like, and I think there's some grad school programs that people really love, but there are sometimes means to an end, and those are important means to an end. I'm not like poo-pooing them, but I do want to say to people, like, in order to help things work for your good, there is some discipline and there is some self-mastery, and there is some ability to do this. And you need resilience, and you need the ability to fail forward, which I think a lot of our society is missing, this like doing hard things, right? And so if you're in the middle mess of your life, and you're failing forward, I just want to say you're probably in a really good growth edge place, right? Like, there's a world where that growth and that falling is going to come and be necessary for the like arrival of the van and the arrival of the, that all coming together part. I think, I don't know, thoughts about that?
I think what my thoughts kind of went to was looking back on this last year, 2024. It was like simultaneously one of the greatest years and one of the hardest years I've ever gone through. Like, so much growth, so much opportunity, so many amazing things. Also, I failed more times this last year at things than ever before. I cried more nights and was sad more nights than I ever have been, probably. And I look back at like the person I was then and the person I am now, and obviously I'm the same person, but the growth that's happened through that, I'm like, wow, man, I love failing. I love it. And I think part of that might come from sports. I, grew up playing sports and I love basketball. That's like the one thing of my life that I like post on social media sometimes is when I go play basketball. Just because I love it, and it's like so nostalgic for me. But man, in high school, I think our record over 4 years was probably like 7-30 something. Like we lost a lot of games, and I put a lot of pressure on myself on games when we'd win and I did well. I was like, yeah, like that was good. And I also was like, I could have probably done better, but we squeaked it out, And then on games when we lost, but maybe I did even better that game, but we just happened to lose because maybe the other team was better or whatever. I could not give myself credit for any of the good that I did.
Yeah,
and maybe I shot 70% that game and made everything that I threw up, and like I just couldn't see that. I only saw the shortcomings
and the end result, right?
And the end result. And so the lessons that I learned looking back on all those things is like, one, I learned how to lose, and that life still went on and it worked out okay. But there's this quote, and I forget who it's by, but I love it, of like, I never lose. I either win or I learn.
Yeah.
And so replacing that L word of lose and loss to learning is huge. Miss Frizzle, the Magic School Bus, like, take chances, make mistakes, get messy.
Yeah.
It's like, that is what life is all about. Like, there's not a soul on this earth, there's not a single person on this planet who is perfect and who is free of mistakes. And the people who you look up to, who are, most successful and most whatever, are probably the people who have made the most mistakes.
This is why when I invite people to come on here, no matter where they are in their life, I always give them this precursor of like, we're not going to talk about your arrival. We're not going to talk about your thing that you're doing, your company, your business. We're going to talk about your becoming, because very few people can relate to your arrival, though that, like, but if we talk about your story and the process, we talk about your creativity, your curiosity, your failure, this is what people can relate to, in the hopes that more people will want to fail. Because the more people that want to fail, the more, I mean, we say success, but the more things that grow out of that failure, right? Yeah. The people that I'm attracted to the most, I mean, I jokingly say to people, like, I'm attracted to failure, because those are the people that continuously want to learn, how to grow. Kaizen is the Japanese word, continuous movement, right? Like, in that continuous movement, you're going to make mistakes, right? If you're just content and you just stay where you are, there's something to be said about being grateful and recognizing what you have. But I think there's something to be said about the growth that happens from, like you just said, over the year. I believe there is a correlation to this, like, risk and failure and growth that comes, that if you aren't doing that risk and failure, that, like, is the growth at the level. And not everyone has to grow at that level, but I am convinced that the more that I do that, the more I can grow as a person. And quite frankly, the more I can connect to others, because again, that's so relatable, right? That's much more relatable to people than sort of your shiny rewards or your sort of polished things that people end up seeing, right?
Yeah. I remember I wrote on the same topic, I wrote in my journal one time, a mistake only remains a mistake if you refuse to learn from it. Yeah. And that's been kind of a mantra that I've had, of like, I make so many mistakes. I've done things that have hurt people I care about. I've we all have. And I could look at those things and be like, I'm a terrible person, which there's been moments in my life where I've felt that way. And I also could look at those things and be like, okay, I've done everything that I can to try and make amends and correct it. I've learned from it to try and avoid it now moving forward. And if I stay in this place of I'm the worst, it doesn't benefit anyone. I can't help other people see that you can move on from things that you've struggled with. I can't help, myself get to a place of happiness. And if I just sit in this, self-pity type of situation, then really, like, what is the point of that?
Stuck, right?
And so, and I say this, and I know there's all sorts of opinions, and it's hard because clearly we don't want to hurt people. We don't want to do things that hurt people. And it would be amazing if we lived in a world where nobody ever did anything wrong and ever hurt anyone. Yeah. And frankly, that's just not the truth of what life is about. And every single one of us, guaranteed, has done something to hurt someone or made mistakes.
Well, LCSW says to love is to hurt, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's just one of those things where those mistakes and those steps do not define, like, you are so much more than any mistake you've ever made. You're so much more than any pain or hurt that someone has caused to you,
I
like the
say to
traumas
people,
that
you're
you've
not the
been
collection
through.
of your worst days.
Yes, absolutely not. And like, even one of my good friends has a quote that's like, even your best life has hard days. And
Yeah.
it's so true. You could be living like in your best life, and you could have a day that just sucks.
Well, you wouldn't know. This is the
Yeah.
thing about the opposition. How do you know you're living your best life if you don't know what it feels like to have?
That's true.
How do you feel grateful if you don't know? I look back at the things that I have. Like, I have a house and I have a car. And there was a time when I was just a student that was like sharing an apartment and like didn't have anything and was eating ramen. I mean, we can all relate to that, right?
Yeah.
And I hope I never grow out of the like, wow, I have this car, I have this house, I have these things that like I didn't have, and like I've done a lot of work to get there. Like, I'm a part of that process, right? They didn't just appear, and I did it on my own. I thought I would do it with somebody else, and I think there's something to be said about if I did not have it, how do I feel grateful and know what I have now, right? I think the same thing, kind of coming back to what we've been talking about growth and relationships and connection. I think we can't erase the failure or the doing wrong, because then how do we know what it feels like to do good? Like, we can't erase problems in relationships, because then how do we know what it feels like to be seen and to be known, right?
That's
like, because
true.
you know what it's not like. And so you're like, oh, I know what it feels like if I want to trust you and be vulnerable and it's not accepted. So when I finally brave myself to do it again and it lands, that, right? Like, it's sort of like we have to have both.
We look back. It's interesting you say that, and that makes sense. Like, we look back on maybe like our first relationship that we ever had, and how much they hurt us, or how much it just was not healthy, not good. But in that moment, like, we didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And now we do because of that.
Yeah.
So now in the next one, and that's where, there's a lot of philosophies, and, there's Freudian philosophies of like, based on what's happened to you, like, you are a result of some of those things. And I think I agree with some of that in some ways, but then there's like the Adlerian philosophies where it's like, no matter what has happened to you, you can become whatever you want to become. You can change. Like, you are not what has happened to you. And I love that. And I connect to that a little bit more, where I think it's just a powerful mindset shift to be able to be like, I can become whatever I want to become, even though these things have happened to me.
In spite of
whatever
is happening. Yeah. Well, I have two more questions for you. Okay. One question is, it sounds like you had a remarkable 2024. Ups and downs and all kinds of things.
We'll call it remarkable.
I will ask you this, Zach. If you and I don't see each other for the next couple of years, but I come on a rafting trip and boom, we're in the water together, and I were to say, and you said to me like, oh my gosh, the last 2 years were the most amazing I have ever had. What would you tell me that you've done over the last few years that made it that way?
Ooh, I feel like I have like the one answer of some goals and things that I'm working on that I think would be cool to talk about, and I know that's not what you're asking for, so I'm gonna go.
You can answer however you want.
I'm gonna go with the other side
you're
of.
Fine.
I think 2024, I had like a word of the year, and it was alignment. I wanted to make sure that my words and actions and people that I was with and things I was working towards and working on were all aligned with what I value.
Got it.
And I think that in 2 years from now, if I were to say, this is kind of a more abstract thing to say, but I think it works, is I spent the last 2 years refining and becoming more and more aligned, and finding ways and things that I could bring into my life to align more and more. Because in doing that, it's like I've spent years and years peeling back those layers, feel like I finally got to a place of who I am. And so now is when I'm putting on the armor of who I truly am.
Got it.
Which then builds this, it's almost like, I don't want to say like robot, but it's powerful.
Yeah.
Like the strength that you get when you are fully aligned, and I know alignment is like
in your purpose, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like a buzzword too, of like alignment and whatever, but it's true. I mean, when I'm setting goals and stuff now,
people call it flow. When you're in your
flow
purpose
state,
and you're in your flow state, like you really, I call it this is an old school because I'm old. The superstar in Mario Brothers, you know, the
Oh yeah.
superstar?
Oh
It's like,
yeah. And you just
this is how I feel like when people
you're just
get in
cruising.
alignment and with their power. It's not that you're not human, but like you can get through a lot of the challenges. Like in Mario, you could just bust through all the
Yeah.
things, right? Because you have this superpower because you know
Yeah.
what to do, right? Or
Yeah.
you
And
feel,
that's what if I could instill anything in anyone is like, you are the superpower.
yeah.
Like, and I know that's cliche to say, but literally, like, you have everything inside you that you need to get to where you want to go and need to be in life. You're never behind. You're always exactly where you need to be, because the only time you're ever feeling like you're behind is when you're comparing yourself to someone who is not you. When you're trying to live your
Comparison is a
life.
thief of joy.
Exactly. When you're trying to live your life feeling like you need to be like someone else, then you're always going to feel behind.
Yeah.
But when you're settling into who you are, when you really dig down deep and like, what do you value? Like, I value friendship, I value family, I value kindness. So now I'm setting all these goals in my life based on friendship, deepening friendships, developing my relationships with my family, and learning how to be kind to myself and others.
Love that.
Right. And if you don't have a value behind the goals, and this is probably a pretty good one for as the new year starts, everybody's kind of setting goals, but more than anything, like if you're trying to go to the gym because you think other people will like you more because you look better or stronger, it's not going to last.
Yeah.
But if you value your health and the ability to go outside and hike and explore, and that's the reason you set your goal to do the stair stepper every day or the go to the gym, then you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's what you value,
Yeah.
and not
Even
because
if you
what
set a
everyone
goal
else
and you're
values.
saying, I'm going to complete my goal, but it's my goal and I want to complete it.
Yeah.
It's better than an extrinsic like value for that goal.
Yeah.
You said at the beginning of this question, there's this and there's this. Are you willing to give one of the goals?
Yeah. I mean,
This is an accountability now.
This is an accountability.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, I love to write, and I get asked a lot, like, what is your story? Like, why are you the way you are?
Book? Okay.
I know.
You heard it here.
So I'm working on a book, and 2025 is my year. Oh, I get emotional talking about this. I feel like I've been through a lot of things, and it's hard because, I mean, we're all guilty of this, where it's like, I've been through hard things, and then I look at other people who've been through hard things that are like, I think are so much harder, and I feel bad because I'm like, my life's easy.
It's relative.
And it's all relative, and it's so hard because pain is relative. Like, if this is the worst pain I've ever felt, then that's a 10 for me, because that's all I know, and it's still hard. And so, you know, I'll tell that to everyone that I work with, like, don't discount what you're struggling with. Accept that it's hard, feel it, allow yourself to feel it, and move forward in growth, knowing that you want to get past that as best you can. But so anyway,
the best gift you can give the world is your story, though.
Yeah.
I believe that wholeheartedly, which is why I was like, everybody has a story to tell. I'm going to sit with my friends and I'm going to have them record their story. But every time someone says they want to write a book, I get really excited. I feel like it's like one of those angels gets wings clapping kind of a thing. One of my favorite things about that, though, and that I've quoted many times on here, Sterling Still said, most ideas die en route. So my hope and my challenge, and I'm blowing this towards you, is think it, goal it, make it. Mm-hmm. Whatever the thing is, like, I wish so much for you to just like make it happen, because in this, and I can say this from experience, in the process of making a book, there's a lot of negative, intrusive self-doubt, external doubts, because people will be like, who cares about your story? They won't ever say that, but it's like, what do you have to offer, really? You know, or you have all this to offer, but it's like, I don't really want to, this is who I am here. And I just want to double down as a fan and a friend and just say, like, I can't wait to read it. Can't wait to come to the book release. I can't wait to buy it and give it to people. Your story matters, and it's gonna be a gift.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, I'm excited. It's one of those things where I've started it, actually. I've started a couple different books, actually, but this one specifically is one that I'm really excited for. It's called The River That Raised Me.
Oh, I was gonna say, please tell me there's something about the river.
The River That Raised Me, talking about, you know, life growing up. From the time I was old enough to walk, I'm like on river trips with my parents as guides and watching them interact with people, lessons I've learned from them, lessons I've learned from people I've met. It's mostly about all the lessons I've learned and people I've met along the way. That's kind of shaped me to who I am. And so,
this
really
is exciting.
Excited.
Well, my last question that I ask most people is, is there anything else when it comes to the topic of connection, belonging, that you feel like you didn't get to say or that you want to share, or kind of a closing?
Oh, let's see. I think, I mean, so many thoughts. This last year, I've met so many incredible people that I feel like are my people.
Mm.
And I've also realized how many people in my life were my people that I was not giving attention to because I was looking for more. And so if I could give any advice, and this is definitely directed right towards myself, is invest in the people that you care about, that care about you. And you will never regret that. We could always look for more and look for different and look for, grass is always greener type of thing. But there are so many good people in your life already, and we spend so much. It's so funny that we spend so much of our life trying to prove our worth to people that will never accept it, when there's literally people that are there just kind of like waiting and are like, okay,
to be invested in. Yeah.
I'm here and I haven't ever left and I'm not going to, just kind of waiting for you to realize that I've been here all along. And I think of, obviously Winnie the Pooh is an incredible example, like Eeyore.
Yeah.
It's funny. Like, I feel like I have so many friends who are Winnie the Poohs, and then I have, Tiggers, and I have Eeyores and Piglets, and like, we're all different. And it's so beautiful. And not once, if you ever watched the show, do they ask Eeyore to be happier or to be different or to be, something that he's not. They simply bring him along, love him no matter what. And that is, if that isn't the essence of like what life is all about, just loving people for who they are. And just like you would a friend, you want the best for them. So if they want to work on something, you're going to absolutely be there to encourage them, but you're never going to push them away because they're different than you. Yeah. And that is the most powerful friendships you can have. So I guess just encouraging anyone listening to both be that friend for other people, be that friend to yourself first and foremost. Yeah. Like, if you are encouraging and kind and loving and gentle and forgiving and compassionate to all of these people, and you're not that to yourself,
give yourself grace.
You gotta be that friend to yourself first and foremost. But then also find those people and invest in those people.
We talked right before this, and I want to say this on here, this idea of kind of creating your own grove, right? I am convinced, and the kind of the null hypothesis of this podcast was that one of the hypotheses that I believed is that if you can create or become a part of a belonging place, it will be your safety net in life. So that, like, if you try something and you fail, it will catch you, right? Like, you won't have to, even if you're single, like a person like me, like, if you knit your tapestry with the people around you, Ben Rector has a song, "You can't make old friends." Just like, give into that, like, invest in those, right? We only have so much, I call them circles of propinquity or friendships. Like, there's something to be said about constantly feeding. You can have lots of friends, but there's some people in your grove, right, that you plant the seeds now, and they will be your shade and your shelter and your protection, right? Like, you won't have to do really anything to have that. They will be there because you've grown them, and you for them, right? Like, I think there's something to be said about this, and trees, the aspen trees, especially here in Utah, have that, right? They have what's called like a pando effect, where they like knit their like roots actually together. And I think there's something really powerful about what you said. It's not about how, and Andy and I talked about this in his episode. It's not so much about how many, but it's like how deep and how great, right? We need a breadth and we need a depth. I think you can spread your love and you can have things. And then I also think, for your safety and security and your belonging, make sure that you take care of the people that are around you, and then make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that take care of you. Because a lot of times people like you, like me, people who have empathetic hearts, people who really are love deeply, they tend to give and give and give, right? And if you don't surround yourself with people that also give back, this is an unending, I don't know,
you will be drained.
Creeps in also like worthiness issues and like value issues, and maybe even God issues, like why I'm like good and why isn't there good. And there's a lot of things that creep in there. I learned pretty early on, I think, compared to a lot of people that I looked at, to like just kind of let go of people that weren't generative, and I always told myself it was easier for me. They've got other people. So instead of me feeling like I was cutting people out of my life that were not healthy, I would always just gift myself the like, they're going to find other people that are for them, right? But because they're not generative for me, it's just not, I can't keep them in my like inner circle. I can't keep them close to me. And that is the best gift I've ever given to myself for friendships, is to just grow trees that are growing me. And it's generative, right? It's generative socially, it's generative creativity, it's generative emotionally. Like, yeah, I'm with you on encouraging people to just like grow where you're planted and grow the people around you and make sure they're growing you too, you know? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on The Belonging Place, and we wish you well. And everybody check out The Outdoor Therapist, and we will put all your information in the liner. And yeah, we're excited about your next adventure, Zach.
I'm excited as well. Thanks for having me, Kylee.